So first for David, he grew up with his brothers on a southern Saskatchewan grain farm, originally homesteaded by his grandparents. He continues his family's tradition of involvement in progressive movements in the interests of farmers and workers. He studied agriculture at the University of Saskatchewan, specializing in field crop management and plant breeding. After university, he worked for Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, including a 25-year stint as officer in charge and head of the seed increase unit at the Indian Head Research Farm, where he was responsible for production and distribution of breeder seed of cereal, pulse, oilseed, and forage varieties developed by AAFC plant breeders. He also advised the Saskatchewan Seed Growers Association, represented AAFC on the Saskatchewan Advisory Committee on Grain Crops, and participated in variety registration recommending committees. Since retirement, he's remained active in the community and resides in Indian Head with his wife, Roberta, a teacher.
Good afternoon. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am speaking from Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect and honor the treaties that were made on all territories, acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and are committed to move forward in partnership with Indigenous nations in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. On behalf of the NFU Seed Committee, I am happy for the opportunity to report on the committee's activities and the issues we have dealt with during the past year. The theme of this year's convention, For the Common Good, is most fitting in this regard because the committee's stated goal is the protection of public and farmer interests. We strive to preserve and strengthen those parts of the current seed system, especially regulations, which protect farmers. Next slide. Why are seeds regulations important? As one of our members stated, who controls the seed controls the food. Who controls the food controls the world. On a personal note, I have been very impressed by the knowledge and insight of my fellow committee members and want to recognize and thank NFU staffer Kathy Holtzlander for her outstanding contributions. Our meetings are well organized, lively, and informative. I have learned a lot from them. Next slide. I thought I would begin my presentation with a brief history and description of the Canadian system. It is unique in the world and is the result of a decades-long process involving countless individuals with often conflicting interests, including farmers, seed growers, scientists, regulatory officials, and members of the private seed trade. The Canadian seed system is not static, but has evolved in concert with changes in technology, politics, and the relative economic power of those using and implementing the system. Next slide. To gain an appreciation of our system, especially the variety registration system, I strongly recommend reading the article, Manitoba History, the Garnet Wheat Controversy, written by Jim Blanchard in 1990. It is available on the internet at the indicated website, which I will post on chat. The Garnet Wheat fiasco gave rise to the scientific and regulatory systems governing the introduction of new varieties in Canada. The dispute over Garnet Wheat resulted from its introduction before sufficient quality testing was done. When the dust finally settled, the result was that no new variety of wheat could be licensed before undergoing extensive analysis by scientists in a number of laboratories, foremost among which is the Grain Research Laboratory of the Canadian Grain Commission. This example underscores the importance of a merit-based variety registration system which considers the interests of all sections of the industry. Next slide. What does merit mean? The seeds regulations pursuant to the Seeds Act defined merit as a minimum of a single trait or characteristic which is beneficial to crop production in Canada, up to requiring many traits from the broad categories of agronomic performance, quality characteristics, and disease reactions. In practice, merit criteria are set by the corresponding variety recommending committees and are scientifically measured. There is a degree of flexibility built into the system to enable registration of new varieties having an urgently needed trait, but having minor deficiencies in other areas. For example, wheat stem sawfly resistance in spring wheat. Next slide. More about the variety registration later. The second way in which the Canadian seed system is unique is the role of the Canadian Seed Growers Association. The CSGA has been delegated the role of seed crop certification in Canada's pedigreed seed system. In other countries, seed certification is performed by a government agency. In Canada, CSGA Circular 6, Rules and Regulations for Production of Pedigreed Seed, define pedigreed seed production standards. The rules and regulations of Circular 6 are set by the seed growers based on decades of practical experience. They are not static, but evolve to reflect developments in production technology and science. Next slide, please. The third aspect of the Canadian seed system, which is somewhat unique, is the role of public sector plant breeding. Historically, Agriculture Canada was the biggest breeding institution in the country, responsible for developing new varieties of cereal, pulse, oilseed, forage, and other crops. The variety registration and seed certification systems, to a large extent, reflect this. The introduction of improved varieties was considered an important public service in the broad interests of Canada. Over time, as the relative economic importance of agriculture declined, so has the political will of the federal government to support public sector plant breeding and the seed system in general. Next slide, please. For example, AAFC has terminated the following plant breeding programs in the past few decades. And as you can see them listed there, these are all programs across the country which have been terminated. You will note that canola at Saskatoon is not included in this list because although Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada no longer releases finished canola varieties, it has an extensive canola pre-breeding and genetic enhancement program at Saskatoon to incorporate new genetics and releases inbred lines to private plant breeders. It is interesting to note that the flea beetle resistance characteristic developed by Agriculture Canada scientists at Saskatoon was not picked up by the private trade, which makes greater profits from the sale of insecticides. This contrasts with the incorporation of wheat midge tolerance in wheat varieties developed and released by Agriculture Canada. Next slide, please. Returning to the activities of the NFU Seed Committee. In 2018, AFC and the seed industry undertook what was termed the seed synergy process for the stated purpose of modernizing the Canadian seed system. Modernization really meant decreasing the role of government regulation by lowering or eliminating quality control standards, increasing industry self-regulation, and privatization of government regulatory functions. It is safe to say that seed synergy aimed to facilitate increased profit extraction from seed sales by intellectual property holders, at the expense of farmers. It was not about maximizing innovation, but maximizing seed company profits. Next slide, please. As a result of seed synergy, this year, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency initiated a seed regulatory modernization process to examine all aspects of seed regulation in Canada and to propose changes. For this purpose, the CFIA appointed a Seed Regulatory Advisory Committee and Working Group to run the show. Care was taken to have representatives from all sectors of the industry, including producer groups such as the National Farmers Union. The working groups divided the issues for consideration among a number of task teams. Although all subjects are important, those of greatest concern are variety registration and seed certification, because these are targeted for deregulation by vested interests in the seed trade and government. The NFU Seed Committee has representatives on several of the regulatory modernization task teams. I have been appointed to the variety registration task team, so I will report on it. Next slide, please. Apart from CFIA staff and a non-voting chairperson, Variety Registration Task Team has 19 members, representing producer groups, commercial or value chain associations, seed industry, variety developers, and government other than the CFIA. That is an Ag Canada plant breeder and a representative from the Canadian Grain Commission. The Variety Registration Task Team started work in April and has met 8 times since. As could be expected, an overarching issue is the role of government versus industry. 11 topics for consideration were identified. Each topic is discussed and options based on the discussion are defined and elaborated, including a rationale, pros and benefits, cons and risks, desired end state, a rationale for the end state, how to measure the option's end state, recommendations or considerations for implementation. A vote is taken on each option for each topic. The first issue of consideration, and that which was given the greatest priority, was should there be a variety registration system? The clear answer from the task team was to support a variety registration system with government oversight. The reasons given for this decision included: the current system is very flexible. That is, it can accommodate crop-specific requirements. It is science-based. It is transparent with merit criteria very well known. It supports product identity assurance to buyers. And finally, it is not overly onerous or expensive. Current costs to register a variety by the Canadian Food Inspection are less than $1,000. Next slide, please. Other topics for consideration by the Variety Registration Task Team include variety eligibility, crop placement in our 3-tier system, variety purity, heirloom heterogeneous and alternately bred varieties, cancellation of variety registration, one variety, one name, regional restrictions on national registration, varieties bred for alternate purposes and linkages and unintended consequences. The task team meetings are well managed, and there is lively discussion on contentious issues. There has been near unanimous agreement on some, mostly technical issues, but where there are competing economic interests, voting falls along expected lines. However, in general, there is strong support for a government administrative varieties registration system from all participants, excepting those representing Seeds Canada. Next slide, please. Apart from participation in the CFIA's seed regulatory modernization process, the NFU Seed Committee has considered other issues, including the regulation of gene editing and how it will affect environmental and health assessments by the CFIA and Health Canada, respectively. In this regard, the work of Kathy Holtzlander has been outstanding. Following discussion with the Seed Committee, she has drafted letters to both Health Canada and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency outlining our concerns. Next slide, please. I would just like to end by saying that many of the seed-related issues seem complicated and technical, and maybe they are. However, protecting the interests of farmers and the broader public are the guiding principles by which the NFU Seed Committee operates. You can rest assured that this will continue to guide our work. Thank you.